Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. This week, what we're going to be talking a little bit about is the tribe. I know, right? But obviously, I'll mention briefly, as I always try to touch on at the beginning of videos, is we jump into organizational culture and then all of the some facets and pockets of that, but individually all of these things ripple out and back in from the culture, any group really, out to the individual, and then of course this can apply to any individual. So the dots connect and can connect in many areas of your life, so use it as you will, and hopefully it can help you develop and grow your team, grow your organization, and most importantly, enhance and develop yourself as well, right? As individuals. All right, onward and upward. So, tribes. Well, I'm not going to get into the depths of tribes, otherwise, this will be a documentary, right? But essentially, from ancient times, people came together, right? Formed tribes, and what was their common? The common theme of a tribe was, well, we have to find provision, right? Food, resources, right? Protect the family, children, all the things, hunt, gather, all that, along with defending your tribe from outside forces, other tribes. And over time, tribes grew and tribes became more established, and then obviously tribes warred against one another and all of that, right? Well, and then here we go. We have all these countries now that have formed, not all of different tribes, but for the most part, we're all broken up into different groups, right? So essentially, they're tribes. But because we're in different tribes doesn't necessarily mean we can't get along. And that tends to be problematic because there are those who take advantage of the division between tribes, right? And the more division they can drive in there, the more they can profit and gain and better themselves, which is kind of sad, but it is where we are. So when we look back on this, how does this affect the individual, right? In the modern era. In the modern era, the tribes have become so large, if we're talking about large social groups and so on, the tribes are so large that the individual and the and their development isn't benefiting to to the greatest capacity that it could. And so what we're going to do here is dive into a little bit less so about physical tribes and locations and countries and all that, and more about I won't say soul tribe, but more about the alignment of people, right? Because if you think about it, most people align or kind of make circles or tribes of their own with their friends and family and so on, right? And why? Because there's a common theme, right? The community they grew up in, the family they grew up in, maybe the local workforce, and all of that also help to influence these things. Here's the challenge. Some folks, even within their own families, within their own friend groups, within their local communities, don't necessarily align with them anymore, right? So, and it's not to say one is evil and the other one's good or any of that necessarily. Although you can have these things occur, right? But there can be the toxic side of this. So, who wouldn't be in your tribe? I mean, if we start with that, who wouldn't be in your tribe? Well, we kind of have to draw a line, right? We have to draw a line and say, these are below my standards, right? Let's start with standards, right? And these are my standards, for my life and for those who I want to be associated with my life, right? Personally, let's say. So, and everything from here up, positive, positive good things, right, in life, flourishing, supportive, all the good behaviors that you can imagine. Everything below that yeah, kind of veer away from that. Nobody's perfect, so just because there's, some of these things will happen, maybe, but by and large, you're going to keep yourself kind of at your standard or above, right? And then understand that everybody's got a different line. Everybody is not the same, right? Everybody interprets those things differently. And then values, right? Because although values can fall within your standards, values can be even loftier things. They can be your ideals, right? They can be heart centered, right? Emotionally centered. They can be intellectually centered. If you're a scientist and you grew up in a small town and you just happen to be an anomaly because the local community, say, are miners or, in the lumber industry, and those are absolutely necessary. It isn't to couch any of these in a negative light. But it is to say, if the community is such and it's built around a particular, livelihood and that sort of thing, and you're a scientist, an archaeologist, you probably don't have a whole lot in common with the local community from that perspective. Doesn't mean you don't get along with people. Doesn't mean you don't have maybe friends you grew up with and that sort of thing. But you may not intellectually align with those folks, right? So what my dad used to say, you kind of have to wear different hats. And that's okay, but we have to be careful and understand there's a difference between taking off my intellectual hat to kind of just sit back and hang out with friends and in the local community and people and so forth, and putting on a mask, right? Putting on a false front, right? And it wouldn't matter if you're the one-off individual, different from the group, or if you're the group, right? So we have to be careful we don't fall into those traps either, because what happens is if there is toxicity, for example, we can put on a mask to blend into what? Potentially within a circle that is below our standard, right? If the behavior of that archaeologist is one who's, off the chain and just, we'll say has a lot, maybe an archaeologist, but super unpredictable and just kind of wild-eyed, then the group's not going to align with that one individual, and vice versa, right? So we have to understand that it isn't all just intellectual. It isn't just emotional, right? It is in spiritual, right? So we can look at churches the same way and see how people align and demonize one another based on their affiliations, right? And rightly or wrongly, they're doing this, right? The lines are different. Well, our line is here, and this is why. Well, our line is here, but this is why, and our line is here. And then this also applies to civic organizations and government, local and broader governments as well, where you have this is our standard, right? One politician may say, this is what I'm going to do, and da-da-da-da-da, raisins in the mush, whatever it is, whatever policies they're setting, and then turn right around and not follow through, right? Consistency is king, right? So we have to be aware that there's a lot of fluctuations going on, group to group and individual to individual. So then what does that mean for an individual who's trying to find their tribe, right? Not just potentially intellectual and potentially, when I say emotional, they connect from a standpoint of empathy, right? You're not looking to be aligning with sociopaths and narcissists, right? So more on that side, and then spiritually too, potentially, right? People who are accepting of your growth in your journey, right? Versus those who are judging you on a regular basis, right? Judging and oppressing and ostracizing and doing those things, right? And this falls also into, kind of a, what do you call it? They used to call it, I can't remember what they used to call it, but essentially you basically have groups who are, I wouldn't say bullying, but they're basically, I guess you could say, shunning certain people, right? It used to be back in the day of, single people. Forget just single parents. That's a whole nother category where people were just getting, judged and ostracized in a significant way, going back in time significantly. But then just single people, right? If your friends, you have a bunch of single friends when you're young, right? You're in your 20s, say, and then you get married. What do you think happens? Well, now you're aligned with your spouse, and now you're having kids and all of that. Your whole life trajectory's changed while theirs has not. So there's a functional ostracizing that happens where some of those same single friends, they don't really call on you as much anymore, right? Well, naturally, your interests aren't aligned now, right? You're emotionally, intellectually, all those things, it's changed. It isn't to say one was good or bad, but they are different. But it can also go into the negative territory. It can go into the bullying. It can go into all kinds of harsh areas. So you have to ask yourself when you're looking to say, okay, who's my tribe? You have a lot to go through to figure out who your tribe is, and a lot of folks, right? Because another element of this is your conditioning. How were you conditioned by your parents? If you were raised, God forbid, if you were raised by narcissists and sociopaths and whatnot, and you didn't get any of that on you, but you have to wear the mask to keep the peace, right? To keep everything calm. You became a peacemaker by default because of these scenarios. Well, you're wearing a mask. I mean, you're doing it. You may feel like you're doing it for the right reasons, but you're really hurting yourself, right? And the challenge here is a lot of folks, they're like, well, they're my family. Oh, they're my friends. I can't do, whatever. Really? Well, ask yourself, are these relationships reciprocal, right? When time are they fair weather friends and fair weather family members who are only supportive and encouraging and all those things when things are going well? And then when maybe things aren't going well, is it a ghost town, right? That's another way to figure out, are you still in alignment? Have a dissenting opinion from your family or friends. How many times have you not expressed it, right? You haven't expressed it, and you're wearing a mask to survive. In some instances, you're not doing this because of nefarious reasons. You're doing it to survive, right? Because to speak up means you would get all kinds of, negative business from these folks. And so that's a good way to measure, hey, is my family and friends, are they really part of my tribe? Because as we grow, a reason, a season, or a lifetime, that can apply to family and friend groups, right? And that's, it's a delicate thing. You have to kind of navigate. Each of us has to navigate that delicately, right? Because it's not about shunning our friends and it's not about shunning our family, but it is to say, are you suppressing yourself, right, because of this? And then how is that coming out in your life now, right? If you're wearing a mask and you're suppressing yourself, now is this coming out negatively in your health, right? Diet and your health, stress levels, all of it, right? And then a lot of times folks will seek out, and what can happen is they seek out other things to numb this a little bit. And this is where you see the isms come in: drug addiction and alcoholism and any obsessive or excessive behaviors can come in and start to mask this type of stuff, right? So it's a really tricky thing. That being on one side of the extreme, and then on the other side of the extreme, maybe you're the you may come off because you do express, because you're fighting a battle within family or friends, right? The other extreme of this. One, the peacemaker wearing the mask, don't want to upset the apple cart. The other side is, people off the chain, always, looking to pick a fight because of, maybe control, right? You're trying to fix what you see as broken. The problem is there's too much brokenness for any one person to fix. And oftentimes the easiest solution or the best solution is the easiest one. These folks are no longer your tribe, right? Your standards are in a particular place, and in whatever areas you may be looking at, their standards are below your standards. Their values are below. They don't value what you value, right? If they don't value transparency and open communication, you know what? You're gonna be either at war with that or wearing a mask at the extremes. In the middle, you might bounce between the two. between wearing a mask, shutting up and coloring, as we used to call it, shutting yourself down for stretches of time, and then it all builds up and percolates, and then boom, now you flip to the other extreme, and then boom, and then you just blow up on people, and then and that doesn't go well either, right? Now that group's looking at you like, what's going on with this person, right? But the reality is that you've been doing this to yourself in a lot of ways. And why is that? Because you didn't recognize. And a lot of times that recognition is, you got to recognize that you're growing, right? A lot of times the reason that people are no longer in your circle and part of your tribe or part of what you thought was your tribe is because you're growing and you're developing, right? And some people are constantly growing and developing, and it may never fit in a particular tribe. And that, kind of the Lone Ranger mentality, a lone wolf type situation where folks are out there doing their thing and they don't have to rely on groups and cliques and all these things to survive and to be validated, right? You see this too. What's the easiest way to get validation? If you want validation in like a minute, I don't care who you are, go to the local pub, sit down, have a beer, hang out, which could be fine, right? If you go in there and subconsciously you're looking for validation, you'll find people to validate you, right? To agree with you and be, everybody's your friend now, right? So what do you think happens? What do you think that ends up turning into? A lot of people who are just, hey, you're fantastic, you're great, you're fantastic, you're great. Meanwhile, other aspects of your life may not be fantastic or great, but you're distracting yourself, right? And there is a level of kind of wearing a bit of a mask, right? Or in this case, suppressing yourself, right? Distracting yourself from what you should be dealing with, right? And it's okay to go have the beer, not shunning that, make your choices in life. But what is the underlying reason? Is it escapism? Is it to avoid dealing with other issues? If that's the case, then what you're going to find is as you start to clean up some of these other issues, communication, or to find those who aren't in your tribe and kind of sidestep that a little bit, and then you find that you're not as much drawn to the things that mask, or suppress or distract, they should say, distract you from those things, so that you end up being a little more at home in your own skin, right? You're more comfortable because you're not wearing a mask, and you're not even subconsciously you're not doing that. So you're relaxed, and you could take or leave anything at that point. It wouldn't matter, right? I can't remember the quote or the thought process and where it comes from, but essentially the thing that we struggle with most is attachment to anything. So if you have an attachment to something, that is where that's the weak point, right? That'd be like where a weld is put in place, right? The weld may be strong, and in some cases welds can be stronger than the material, but we'll call those weak welds in this situation, an adequate weld, not a great weld. And now this becomes, a critical juncture that isn't strong, right? So it's a complex thing. It's not easy to find your tribe. But what I would say is that if you relax, let your masks go, ask yourself, who can I be myself around, right? Who am I supported by? Who am I encouraged and inspired by? And who do I do that for? Because remember, this is a two-way street. This isn't just who does this for me, right? This isn't a hero worship or worship of any kind. This is about, hey, what kind of reciprocity exists in my relationships, right? This could be an organization as a whole, right? So when I'm talking about this, yes, it's individual, but it's also team, and it's also larger groups and organizations, right? And you have to ask yourself, what personality type? Because that's another thing that is often done is somebody comes to work in an organization, you take your personality, all these different personality tests, HR will give you whatever, figure out, hey, what's your style and where you're coming from and all the things, right? And those are great. But what they don't account for in a lot of instances, what they don't account for is the conditioning, how you were raised and all the circumstances of your life, what you overcame and what you didn't overcome, right? Because while there's some things that can generally speak to your thought processes and how you feel about things, and your levels of empathy versus, are you a narcissist on the extreme, or are you highly empathetic? Somebody who's empathetic can also be a person who wears a mask and who's just wants to keep the peace at all costs. The problem with that is you need people to speak up, right? To be, to draw a line if something unsafe or unsatisfactory is occurring. This is where quality issues come in, right? You don't want people just shutting up, and you also don't want people who are out there, just causing a ruckus as well on the other extreme. So even organizations have to go, who's in alignment with our organization? What is the heartbeat of our organization, right? And that can be difficult because your organization may be problematic. Okay. And if your organization is struggling because you've got all kinds of, we'll say a lot of variables going on, that can be a challenge. So first you have to get your organization more in alignment, because what can happen in organizations is they start looking outward. They may have an ideal, right? But they don't represent their own ideal. The people in their organization as a whole, as a team, right? They don't live up to the standards. They don't live up to behaviors. They aren't welcoming. They aren't an empathetic team that communicates well, that understands, that collaborates, innovates, all the good stuff, right? It can be a mix. And if it's a mix, you got to do your own house cleaning before you can start drawing the line in the sand. And so what you can see is an organization that does this with can be good intentions, right? Well, these are our standards, these are our values, da da da. I've got people who've been working here for 20 or 30 years that don't really represent that, right? But I'm bringing these, people in who have higher standards and who, are a little more in touch with, the human being, and they come on board and they discover, in not too short a time, that this organization is really toxic, right? And so you start to see turnover because these people are exiting, right? They're going, oh, yep, something's wrong here, and exit. I've seen it in organizations, just like everybody has seen it. So it's a challenge, and it's a big reason why there's like $5.5 trillion of waste, in the U.S. for all U.S. businesses that is just dumped out onto the ground every year, that are really emanations of these sorts of, lack of awareness when it comes to human behavior and team dynamics and even individual psychology, right? Because we can know a thing, but if we're not exercising the same thing, right? If I have a standard and I have an expectation of my team, but my support staff or my leadership, site leadership, doesn't also emulate this, well, then I have an imbalance, right? And now this is where the whole term of being hypocritical comes from, right? And a team will see through that in a heartbeat. They'll start to see where, well, you have this expectation of us, but you don't have this expectation of yourself. Your own behaviors don't show engagement, collaboration, innovation, and a willingness to develop and all the good stuff, right? They'll pick up on that in a heartbeat. And some have just hung on for a paycheck. Sadly, the seeking of your tribe is a luxury that many don't have, because they are essentially landlocked by the organization or the parameters of having the job that they have. They may have worked themselves into a decent position professionally, but from a healthy organizational standpoint, they're suffering and they're in agony, right? So they may be wearing that mask, and they're essentially one person at home and a completely different person at work, because they know that if they were at all to openly communicate, that they would quickly probably become targeted by this organization, because organizations a lot of times, and this can be true of individuals, don't want to look in the mirror, because they know if they look in the mirror, they have to deal with what they see in the mirror, right? So, hold up the mirror, now I got to deal with what's in the mirror. And they don't want to do that all the time. There's a lot of organizations out there who will never do that. And then there are a lot who want to, but it's tricky, right? It's because there is a certain surgical methodology to doing this. And what's kind of ironic is you'll see this, where large organizations will hire big firms that will charge big dollars, right, to come in and put their stamp on, hey, we came in and we did this, and they moved the needle for about a minute, and then it just recedes. And why is that? They were just paying for the stamp on this thing to give validation to the organization that they did something productive and constructive for the broader organizational culture and the team. But they really didn't. They really didn't go more than a thimble deep. And the team sees right through this, and they kind of take note. There's a little bit of change for a short period of time, but they understand that the rest of the, say, leadership side of the house is not also emulating this, and then it all falls away, and it's just a waste, because it's not about real change. It's not really holding up a mirror. It's getting somebody to tell you that, oh no, you're great. This organization, this leadership and site level management, they're great. They're great. They're great. No, in general, you can say, oh yeah, you're pretty good, but let's not worry about what you're pretty good at. Let's look at where you're weak, and let's try to build on that, try to make you better, right? It's like strengthening a muscle. If your legs are strong, a trainer's not going to come in and spend a lot of time on your legs, right? They're going to say, okay, let's work on your upper body strength, right? Where is the need, right? And then it doesn't mean we forget the legs, but it does mean that we have to proportion our attention. And the problem is that over the decades, maybe even the last century, so much of it has gone away from the human being and gone strictly to functional changes. Remember, folks, it's not about the hammer. It's about the heart holding the hammer, right? That makes the house, right? Yes, the hammer is a tool. And it wouldn't matter if this hammer is a metal hammer, a wooden hammer, a golden hammer. It's just a hammer, right? It's just a tool. But the heart, right? And when I say the heart, the essence of you as a human and your team as human beings, right? And your organization as a group of human beings working together for a common good should make up your tribe. But the elements within that also require a certain emotional, mental, spiritual health, right? and while spiritual is on your own time, the rest of it can be looked at, because you're carrying your history into any organization that you work in. You're carrying your history, your family history around your family. You're carrying that, your friend associations into your life. You think that leaves you when you go to work every day? No, of course it does. Look at anybody that has a marital spat, comes to work the next day. You're not getting 100% of that out of that person, right? So we have to find alignment within our associations, and we have to understand that if we're going to be good humans, right, and we're going to seek out a tribe that we align best with, that we don't sacrifice, right? Now, it isn't to say that everybody's going to be perfectly aligned standards-wise as human beings in their own life, in their own circle outside of work. But it doesn't mean that we can't develop together as a team, and the good result of that spills over in a positive way into your personal and communal life, right, in the community. So everything is connected, folks. And if you start to wear one mask at work, and I'm one mask at home, and I'm one mask in the community, and I'm one mask this and one mask that, you've lost yourself. You've lost your identity. And it's quite possible because you have not either found your tribe, right, or you have stuck with those who aren't your tribe, that your identity's already been fragmented and struggling behind these things. But now let's look at the positive side of this. Once you figure out these things, just the knowing of this, just the awareness of this, that you may be wearing a mask, right? And it may be subtle. You may not even realize that you're doing it. But just ask yourself, are you scripting yourself before conversations? Are you giving pat answers just to keep people at peace and at bay? I mean, we've all done it, folks. There's nobody who hasn't done that at some point. So this isn't to say, oh, wow, I can never, no, it takes time to understand and realize what you're doing, and then start to give yourself a little bit of space to think for a minute and go, okay, I need to find my voice. Now, this is also, I think I did a video about this too, but the misnomer of a midlife crisis. Our culture has demonized the midlife awakening and put a framing of midlife crisis, right? It's not a crisis, but if we frame it as a crisis, and then we go, oh my gosh, somebody's going through a awakening, and we actually address this as a midlife phase of life where you're developing, you are coming online, okay? You are starting to wake up. But what the world will do is they'll start throwing the flash and the this and the that and the distractions, right? And the distractions now get the energy of that, and you don't really get the benefit of it. And your life may implode because of a midlife, the crisis, that culture puts on this is the result of taking that path, right? So understand the midlife awakening for folks, and different people go through it at different times in life, some in their 30s, some in their 40s. And what happens during this? They start to find their voice. They start to realize a wife might realize she's wearing a mask, and now she's starting to be real communicative and real honest and open and say how she feels and da-da-da-da. Now, or a husband the same way. And any group, and any person in any group, the same way. A person within their friend group, a person at their church, a person in civic and community groups that they're involved with, right? Politics, same way, right? Which that's a whole other animal. But people start coming online, and then people will look at them like, oh my gosh, they're losing their stuff. No, they're not. They're starting to wake up. And the thing is, you have to give people space to express themselves and understand this, because you may be lagging behind that person. If in relationships, you may be lagging behind, or maybe you were the one that went through it first, whatever. But whatever it is, typically people don't go through it at the exact same time. So you have to understand it. And if you understand this, now take that in any relationship, frame it in any group that you're involved with, and then look at your organizations. Your organization, people in your organization go through awakenings too. Well, I've been working here for 10 or 15 years and I've just had it, da-da-da-da-da, right? And somebody loses their, blows their top. And why is that? They've been wearing a mask. They've been suppressing themselves, right? And now they're going through a kind of a midlife awakening within the organization. The organization may be experiencing this throughout the entire group of folks at different times, and think, oh my gosh, our people are losing their stuff. What is happening, right? But if you understand that you're going to go through a lot of change and a lot of this awakening, right? And look, folks, you're going to go through it whether you want to or not, right? And you're going to do one of two things. You're going to take it and you're going to go down the roads where, that have toxic results for your life, or you're going to use it constructively. Rarely do people just ride that out. And if they do ride it out, they will eventually blow their top at some point, because you can't keep that in. You have to be heard. You have to be respected for your inputs and for your ideas and for what you bring to the table. And that's the way it should be. And this is how you know if you're in alignment. And you're going to figure out before, during, or after your awakening, because some go through this very early in life, you're going to figure out really quick what's for you and what's not for you, right? And that doesn't mean that we have to hate anybody, right? We don't want any haterade. We don't want it. It's starting to rain. You can't hear. Hopefully that isn't too distracting. I apologize. But we don't want to be hating on anyone. Why is this? We all go through this, folks. Our culture is going through a rebirth right now. 2025. We're going through a rebirth right now. And people are freaking out in all kinds of different ways over all kinds of stuff, right? Political, global, socioeconomic, astronomical, or whatever, right? There's meteors flying through space. People are freaking about all kinds of things. Disclosure, all the things that are out there, right? People are kind of abuzz. We're going through the birth canal, folks, and it's stressful to go through the birth canal. It's restrictive. We don't know what's ahead. We know there's something probably good on the other side of this, but right now it's cramped. I'm overheated and my heart's racing too fast. It's a birthing, right? And this is the same thing that happens with us as individuals as well throughout the span of our life. So if you understand this and you don't let it overtake you, you can sit back and go, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. And it'll also allow you to go, as you have this awakening, start to look and say, and assess and evaluate. I love my family, but I can't live around my family, or I can't live with my family, or I can't be whatever, right? And the same thing with your friends, right? Hey, I love my friends, but they're they're going that direction. I'm going this direction. Love you, but I can love you from over there, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be standards. It can be interests as well, right? It could be that you develop in such a way that your interests are no longer what your interests were. You aren't aligned now with people you went through middle school with, right? Or high school, if you're, a few generations or a few decades ahead of that, like I am. You don't align with most of the people you went to high school with. The thing you had in common was the thing that you maybe had in common back then, or you just know them, right? And that sort of thing. So it doesn't mean that you don't, value and respect them and all that sort of thing, and love them from afar. Hey, I love my friends, but this is my life, right? And don't feel bad about that, right? Because I guarantee you, nobody else is feeling bad about it for the most part, right? Especially if you're developing and you've developed out of that circle, whether it be friends, or family, or community. If you developed your way out of that circle, that's another aspect of this. If you're looking around saying, I don't know who my tribe is, it's probably because you're growing, and what you haven't realized is you're growing, right? Your interests are changing. Your expectations are changing. What you'll put up with is no longer what you'll put up with. All the things, right? So go easy on yourselves, right? But finding your tribe is kind of a tricky deal. The basic thing, though, is are they aligned with you? Are you in a tribe, organizationally or any other group related, any relational aspect, who's supportive, inspiring, encouraging, uplifting, or in another way you can, or is it the other? They're not those things. And if they aren't those things, then maybe they're not your, those people aren't your tribe. That organization is an alignment for you, and so on. Or these people on your team aren't in alignment with your organization. It works that way too. So, and it's nothing to be judgy about, or to be harsh or critical or mean about, or ostracize, or feel empowered to do anything negative. It is simply an awareness to have, so that you can more gently, right? Stress gently, align with, in a positive, healthy way, people and organizations and groups that align with you. And you'll find that when you do that, you're probably going to thrive so much more intensely than you would have otherwise. Because right now, if you're not doing that, or if you haven't done that, or haven't started doing that, you're pushing against, you're at war, right? You're at war with people within your own tribe, or who you think are your own tribe, with your own groups and that sort of thing. You're at war. If you're warring with anyone, that's a good indicator that to assess your alignment. And if your alignment's not not there, then you just kind of have to step back gently and go, I need to go this way, and be kind with it. On that note, folks, hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember, hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day or more to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. When you do this, not only help you to transform culture, but you're transforming yourself. And remember, we can't transform anything on the outside if we're not willing to transform on the inside. Super important. All right, folks, hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.